hits itself. Too much beef is causing pain. We cannot hide from our children's pain. Why can't you see we're all worth the same? We're all part of the human race, but we're blinded by black and we're blinded by white. The hate in our eyes keeps blocking the light. Break all the rules you're living by. You'll be free of lies. Wake up, wake up, open up your eyes. Wake up, we're running out of time. They don't really give a damn about you. None of the things they say are true. Wake up, wake up, wake up. It's time to wake up. Lies, 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 lies. Break all the rules you live by. Break all the rules. Break all the rules you live by. Don't keep on being the fool. Break all the rules. Break all the rules. Break all the. Break all the rules you're living by. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, running out of time. They don't really give a damn about you. None of the things they say are true. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, They don't really give a damn about you. None of the things they say are true. Wake up, wake up, wake up.
That's right. Wake up. We're running out of time. Welcome back, everybody. This is Gary Legier, your host of Martian Villa, known also as the Mad Martian. And welcome back to the Martian Revelation that is upon you all again now. So let's introduce our guest, Mr. Alfred Lamont Weber. And Alfred Weber is a graduate of Georgetown Preparatory School in Classics, 1960. Yale University Industrial Administration Honors in 1964. Yale Law School of International Law in 1967. University of Texas Counseling 1997. And a Fulbright Scholar, International Trade in 1968. Alfred has taught at two universities, Yale University Economics Department, Taxation, and the University of Texas Government Department / Constitutional Law. And Alfred has served in leadership positions in environmental protection, international law and justice, public health, exopolitics, and public broadcasting as well. And Alfred has been a host on WBAI FM New York and Vancouver Co-op Radio, and he has been featured on major international networks including CBC TV, CBS TV, CNN TV. Well, that's not a thing to brag for anymore. True TV, Press TV, and others. And in exopolitics, while a futurist at Stanford Research Institute, Alfred served as director of the 1977 proposed Carter White House extraterrestrial communication study, as well as a disclosure project witness in 2001. And futurist Alfred Lamont Weber's principal social contributions have been: 1, founding the science of exopolitics through his 2000 book, Exopolitics; 2, the 2014 discovery of the omniverse as the third major cosmological body after the universe and the multiverse through which humanity understands the cosmos. And 3, the development of the positive future equation and the ascension hypothesis that describes soul development in our universe and omniverse. And Alfred Weber states that humans are as holographic fragments of a living universe. Each of us has a holographic entity of God within us, as does each spiritual entity in the universe. We can influence events in the universe through conscious spiritual acts. This is not a metaphor, but actual reality. And I attest also that's what this show strives to do and is evidence of as well. Because it is by this show and you, the listener, which makes our fate that we will ensure the Martian revelation. But anyway, on the facesofmars.com, you can click on his image there, the book cover of his book called The Omniverse. Transdimensional intelligence, time travel, the afterlife, and the secret colony on Mars. I do want to get into a couple of those aspects, especially where we go tonight, especially in regards to all this exopolitics happening upon us now today in the world. I don't know if you caught the first hour, sir, but would you agree all this falls in the realms of exopolitics and what we see taking shape? What do you think is the bigger goal of that plan, if it is, sir? And welcome to the show for the first time, and it's great to have you on, and I look forward to help bringing forth your information, sir. How you doing?
Well, thank you. I'm really happy and privileged to link up with you in time and space, and I support your goals, and I would like to humbly dedicate our time and our interview tonight to 2 brave Mars explorers and whistleblowers. The first is William Whitecrow, who was a Mars explorer. He was assassinated because he was a whistleblower a few days after our Mars disclosure program on Exopolitics TV on February 10th, 2018.
Wow.
Yeah, these things are real. And Andrew D. Bashago, who was an early childhood participant in the secret Project Pegasus DARPA time travel program starting in 1968 forward, and who was a Mars explorer himself, and who was on Mars with William Whitecrow, and who disclosed both about the time travel and the secret time travel program, and about the Mars program and his exploration on Mars, which included his Mars trips with one Barry Soetoro, later changed his name here in a court in British Columbia to Barack Obama, and became U.S. president. And Andy now finds himself in a situation in which he was clinically blinded in 2018. He just in the last couple of weeks has had the first 2 of 8 operations to restore his vision.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got links there where people can go online and donate to his medical expenses to restore his sight. I can explain why, but we believe that he was blinded as COINTELPRO in payback by the deep state for his whistleblowing that, yeah, there's secret bases on Mars. They want to keep this all secret, even though it's paid for by the U.S. taxpayers, and even though all of this should be to the benefit of humanity. The fact that we have all of these advanced technologies, the fact that we have an active secret space program, the fact that we have an active Mars, Earth exchange program. We have friendly relations between the Mars human civilization and the Earth human civilization is all a deeply held secret within the deep state. And why? Just for their profit, not for the advancement of the human civilizations of Earth and of Mars and of the rest of the solar system and of the galaxy. So it's to these two brave individuals, William Whitecrow and Andrew D. Bishago, that I'd like to dedicate our interview tonight. This is very real stuff.
Yes, indeed. And I had Mr. Bishago on the show when I started airing Back Through Time, as I phased back through time, pun intended. Listeners to this show could appreciate. Last April of last year. And I think he did say then that he was having eye issues or starting to have issues. And so, yeah, I have no problem dedicating that to him, sir. And hopefully he progresses through that. We will add, for the archive page, I will add those links on there for him, for anyone that wishes to help support him. And when he's feeling up to it again, and better, obviously, wow, eight surgeries. But, he's more than welcome to appear back on the show and give us updates or his thoughts on things, or to just let him vent out. He may need that venting, you know what I mean? And
Sure.
What better place than the Martian Revelation?
Exactly.
You know, but definitely, obviously, you didn't catch the first hour of the news. So much going on. So much, the race is on, isn't it? Would you agree? At least publicly now, the space race is finally gearing up. And you mentioned the deep state and Barry Soetoro, because that would mean that the deep state, yes, would have control of those issues, because he was obviously their president trying to destroy our nation. What would be their advantage once our nation was down into a globalist control, regards to what they already know and have, like you already touched base, sir, about what's on Mars? Because this might be blowing away a lot of the people's mindsets here. But then again, there are people I'm sure listening that are well familiar with your efforts and Mr. Bishago and the secret space program and time travel and all that. It's really fascinating. And even on this show, sir, I'm going to admit the time travel aspect has hit as a major component, not only to the show Down Through Time and Back Through Time, but also hitting home personally with myself, which puts another whoop-de-doo aspect to all this. But to me, it's like, could there be manifestations of where other evidences of these time travel programs could be seen in our research? Is it surprising, in essence, sir, that it would come up?
Yeah. Well, that's a multi-part question, and
Yes,
and there's a lot to there's a lot to talk about, and I'm sure that you've covered it over time on this question with your very excellent guests. So I don't know whether I'm adding to probably the very deep load of knowledge that you have, but I will add my what I know, and that is that as those of us who work in the field of Mars and in the field of our inhabited universe, our inhabited and organized universe, multiverse and omniverse, know, the United States and Russia and the UK and other nations have had an organized Mars colonization program since the 1960s, and this goes back to before the last I would call it the last well, there are a lot of different theories, but I will just unpack some of the theories. We can talk about it. Some of the theories are that, of course, This all began by the the attack by the Draco reptilians from Draco to the human home base in Lyra, which led to to uh, the diaspora of the human race from Lyra, and our human colony or settlement on Earth and in this solar system on on Terra on Earth is part of the diaspora from the Lyra constellation following the Draco reptilian attacks upon the human colonies in Lyra. And as we understand from the evidence, there have been three major human Draco reptilian wars in this planet. The first one, about 705 or so, 705,000 years, occurred in a nuclear war with a very large planet, Marduk, which is now the asteroid belt. And
I thought that was called Tiamat, or is
yeah,
that just? Oh,
no,
that's
it has both the name Tiamat and the name Marduk. It has both. It has both names,
right.
and 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 that was the first of the major reptilian human wars, and it resulted in the obliteration of the planet into the asteroid belt.
Like
And
Dr. Tom Van Flander's exploded planet hypothesis, as well as the tidal model of Hoagland's. God, I have to mention the unmentionable, but we do have to go where science has led us, don't we? Right. So that's where that fits in. Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah. Now, but I'm not through with with Tiamat yet, because this fits
right,
exactly into Mars. But there
right.
were 2 billion souls there that were so traumatized that they were put into a knot, into an interdimensional knot for about 100,000 years, and the universe spiritual governance had to deal with them. It was terrible, and we know this from the Law of One. In fact, I interviewed the scribe, the man who took down, and he told us all about it. He took down the very words from the Law of One that were describing all of this. And so those 2 billion souls eventually, after about 100,000 years, were moved interdimensionally to Earth, and they are living out their lives incarnating on Earth now, trying to, in these incarnations on Earth, get through the trauma of having lived through the obliteration of that planet. However, and this is very important to understand, almost contemporaneously, about 700,000 years ago, the war moved from Tiamat to Mars, because Mars was a verdant planet. At that time, this solar system in the third density had a very active uh, uh, interplanetary society. It was a pyramidal interplanetary society between Tiamat, Mars, and Earth. And Mars was a verdant planet, as was Tiamat, as was Earth, and Mars then suffered a reptilian human nuclear war. And to prove that,
That matches Dr. John Brandenburg's outcomings from even what they found in Viking of that evidence.
Yeah, and now they have found nuclear uh, radioactive isotopes that match the radioactive isotopes from hydrogen bombs on Mars.
Xenon 129, correct.
Yeah, so that tends to be evidence that supports the hypothesis of the reptilian human nuclear war on Mars that turned Mars from a verdant planet into the oblong pumpkin-shaped planet with a thin atmosphere, with a barren surface, with no greenery on it, and with reptilian animal forms on the surface, and with a human population under the surface of about 1 million, which are the Maris Homo Maris terrace, which are the human Mars humans, which are our genetic cousins, and they are the ones who go back and forth between Earth and Mars, and whom Mars explorer Andrew D. Basiago met in the 1960s at a U.S. Air Force base in the company of his father, who was in effect his handler within the time travel and the Mars program. He met 3 Mars astronauts who came from Mars in their rocket ship, and there have been trips back and forth from Mars. Nikola Tesla, one of his great feats was to set up the interactive signaling atop a Hopi mountain in New Mexico, I think it was, and establish interactive communication with Mars, and that opened up a great chapter in Earth-Mars communication after this these series of wars with Tiamat and with Mars. Now, what that leaves us is with the great question, and this is a great question, and I'm gonna ask people here to just leave their minds open and to leave hero worship at the door and leave their minds open, because the great challenge of our generation is to prevent a nuclear trifecta. That is, will there be a nuclear trifecta of a nuclear war that will destroy the third density life-bearing planet of Tiamat, Mars, and then Earth? Because it looks like that pattern is starting to repeat itself once the U.S. and Russia have pulled out of the nuclear treaty, and we're now on an escalation, because it was just last week, just a few days ago, that President Putin, head of the Russian Federation, said, well, if you guys begin to escalate, I'm going to have to start to target Washington. And it could be that what we're seeing now is what we can call a nuclear kabuki theater, where the same souls that incarnated at Tiamat, that incarnated around Mars, and that blew up those things, are now incarnating to pull off a nuclear trifecta, and that is to blow up the third planet on Mars. Now, I believe, this is a hypothesis that I'm putting out, that the reason why 2,000 years ago a paradise son of God incarnated here on this planet, Joshua ben Joseph, and you can say, well, it didn't exist. He would just supply in, or that's the myth that was perpetrated by the chief propagandist of the Jews at the time, Josephus, who actually wrote the 4 synoptic gospels, Matthew, Luke and John, because they're all alike. They could be copy and pasted, those 4 gospels, and they could have been commissioned by the Roman emperor, and the whole thing is a myth. However, there's also channeled material like the Urantia book, which holds that no, there was a paradise son of God that was sent here who drew a line in the sand.
Yeah.
When they confronted some of the rebellious angels in the form of Lucifer and Satan, who had taken over this planet and said, hey, this is our turf now. The kingdom of God lost out, but this is ours. But they said no. And so he may have drawn a line in the sand, so they're not going to get a nuclear trifecta to blow up Earth. That, I believe, that is the burning question of our generation now. Now, I was greatly disappointed, and I tweeted yesterday and Facebooked the following. I said, because I've been greatly alarmed by what we call the frequency genocide, and that is that Karine Hutzebaut, a great whistleblower from Belgium, who has been really exposing the pedocriminal organizations that exist in the intelligence agencies, in the churches, in the banks, in the governments, in the monarchies. And she said that she met with the head of state security of a nation who confirmed to her that there is a program to genocide 4 billion people. And if you go to Deagle.com, you will see there, and it's completely set out, and they have it for all the countries. For the United States, they have the population of the United States for 2016 is 324 million, and they have it out to 2025, and that's at 100 million, which means that they're going to depopulate the U.S. of 224 million people between now and 2025. And they do that through 5G, through the fires, through the chemtrails, through all of this. And I was...
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Sorry?
No, I was going to say, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but there's a couple points. One, when you were talking about Tesla, that was, I believe, in Colorado.
Yeah,
Colorado,
right.
Which is where I'm at now, right in Space Command's backyard. 2, this led to also Todd and Jenkins. Remember the early, what was it, 1912 or 1920 something? I think it was 12. Of the national worldwide radio blackouts where the U.S. Navy, well, the Army, and basically around the world, the military, and all the countries would go silent so that Todd and Jenkins could get those broadcast messages from Mars following up Tesla's work, where amongst like the first, what could be attributed compared to like a fax machine, it would detail out, print out the blips and blashes and dashes or whatnot, and the lines of representation of the signal that was being seen, into which amongst that was a side profile of a face. Now, which when I had Andy on, Mr. Bashago, last year, I mentioned this to him, and that it was no surprise. I believe it was this contact, because the NSA, or what became the NSA, later took over. They immediately took Todd and Jenkins' findings, as well as Tesla's later on. But this could be the same basis that laid out the plan down through time base of Brookings. Now, which leads us to Stanford Research University, and what you, sir, claim, I guess you were a part of. Were you there back in the days when the Mars mission and the remote viewing and all that was going on, basically on the same floor, regards to these aspects? And you know what was found out about the remote viewing of Mars and what was described, and also what Hoagland and many others were involved with. Were you there, connected to them in that aspect for those researches going on, sir? I want to get off on the right foot, so I know.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is how I went there.
Okay. Hope you don't mind me bringing that up.
Yeah. This was during the. It was a very interesting period of American history, and this was during the 1976 presidential campaign, which was between Gerald R. Ford and Jimmy Carter. And Gerald R. Ford, as you may recall, was the inventor of the magic bullet theory. Remember that?
Yes.
He was on the Warren Commission, and he was a guy that came up with the magic bullet theory, where it was this magic bullet that came through and did a 90-degree turn and did all this stuff. And he was, in my judgment, a disgrace to Yale Law School, which I'm a graduate of, and that's just my preface. Okay.
Well, you went there too, so you can make that claim.
Yeah. So Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez of Texas, who was chairman of the House Banking Committee, asked me to come down to Washington because I was at that time part of the growing number of citizens that were greatly disturbed by the apparent evidence that the Kennedy assassination was an inside job. And I had linked up with a private group called the Assassination Information Bureau. And I was living in New York, and I was head of a citizens campaign for an independent congressional investigation. So I went down, and Congressman Gonzalez asked me to coordinate with him to get a congressional inquiry going, and together we worked with the Congressional Black Caucus and Dr. Martin Luther King's widow, and we got the House Select Committee on Assassination started. And contemporary with that, President Jimmy Carter won the election, the 1976 election, in November of 1976. And so right after that, I went back to New York, and that was the interim between the 76 election and 1977, January, when he was going to be sworn in. And I got a phone call from a senior advisor to President Carter. He was a senior lawyer from a prominent law firm in Atlanta, who asked me, invited me out to meet with him at the Carlisle Hotel in New York. Mm-hmm. and I went. He said President Carter would like to be involved, but as President-elect Carter would like to maintain liaison with the House Select Committee on Assassinations that had just been set up, because he knew that I was a consultant to Henry B. Gonzalez, the chairman of the House Select Committee on Assassinations. And so we said, fine. And he invited me down to a dinner in Washington in Capitol Hill. So I went down to that dinner. And at that dinner, it was President-elect Jimmy Carter's inner circle. So we were there for that night. And I said, we began coordinating how this was all going to work and how the Carter administration was going to work. And at that time, my work was also in disclosure, extraterrestrial disclosure, and I got the concept that evening to have the first civilian-led extraterrestrial disclosure at that dinner.
Oh.
So, because all the ones before, if you recall, Gerald R. Ford, after the 1973 UFO flap over Michigan, he had led one, but it was all military controlled, and he had brought in former Secretary of Defense McNamara to say, oh, UFOs are all swamp gas. You follow me? And had just done a big cover-up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I said, well, fine. Stay in. I'll stay in touch. So a friend of mine took me down to the Bowery in New York, and I met one of the main subjects in remote viewing of Targ and Puthoff, Russ Targ and Hal Puthoff. So I had to go out to the Bay Area over Christmas, and I called them up, and they said, well, come out to SRI. So I went out to SRI, and I said, look, I just met with President Carter's inner circle, and they are completely open to this. And they said, well, go across over here, and we think you should meet with the futurists here, the Center for the Study of Social Policy, and Peter Schwartz.
At SRI.
Yeah.
Okay. The futurists. You see, people? The futurists. Remember, they had the remote viewing going on there.
Yeah.
All right? In the future and or the past, we got the findings, at least by what was put forth by the Pentagon, was it? I think you're more familiar with that, sir. Forgive my ignorance. Oh, a brain fart on that at the moment. And also the Mars mission program that was going on consecutively right up the hall. All right, go ahead, sir.
Yeah.
I mean, I found it fascinating.
So I went and made a proposal, and I said, look, I've just met with Carter's inner circle, and they're open to a proposal for a civilian-led extraterrestrial disclosure, extraterrestrial communication project. So it was all, they approved it. I came on board. I went to the Carter White House as a futurist. It was approved by the Carter White House, and I went out to. I then went out to the Pentagon, and it was there that I ran into problems, because the Pentagon even though the Carter White House had approved the project for the Carter White House extraterrestrial communication project, the Pentagon, I was meeting with an Assistant Secretary of Defense at the Pentagon, and I was hit with directed energy weapons there, and then I was hit with men in black. And
Really? Now, I'm sorry to interrupt again. I have a habit of doing that, but this is a good question.
yeah,
You were hit with directed energy weapons. How do you know what was the effect that would make you attribute that, or did you find that out later? Go ahead, sir.
yeah, good. Uh, Excellent question. Uh, at that time,
Mhm.
I maintained studies of electromagnetic weapons, so I was perfectly cognizant of this. And when I went to the Pentagon, uh, the office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense was at the E ring, at the inner ring of the Pentagon. And so I went to his office, a very large office with 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 a secretary. And so I was waiting in there, and I'm I'm sitting there, and she's reading a newspaper, and all of a sudden she lifts up the newspaper so that all I could see was the newspaper. And on the cover of the newspaper facing me were written in huge letters SEX. And then they kind of started beaming me. You follow what I'm saying? But
Yeah, they want to catch your attention. Sex. Oh yeah.
yeah. So they were doing mind control tricks on me. You follow me?
Okay.
So, and that's because the the Pentagon did not want to know, did not want us to discover that they were in communication with
The Martian.
no,
Oh,
reptilian elements. You see, with negative extraterrestrials.
malevolence.
Malevolence, yes. You see, because in 1954, President Eisenhower signed the Greada Treaty, which was a treaty with the reptilians, with the Draco reptilians. And essentially, that brought the entire United States as a jurisdiction, all of its law enforcement under the jurisdiction of the Draco reptilians.
And those are the ones that want to basically eat us up.
Well, because of that, the United States had a quota of baby meat that it has to give to the reptilians. The quid pro quo that the U.S. got there was this. It said, okay, U.S., you're going to become the most powerful nation on the earth. You're going to have 175 military bases around the planet. Essentially, you are the proconsuls of the Draco reptilians on the planet. But you're the slaves of the Dracos, so you're going to have to adopt the Draco's values. So what are the Draco's values? The Draco's values are human sacrifice, pedophilia, war, disease, crime, and poverty. So that's why the U.S. has been at its core such a repressive nation, which goes against the values of the founding fathers, the values of the Bill of Rights, the values of everything of 50% of the American people that have souls. You see?
That'll explain all the abortions and everything going on. So you're saying they're demanding more meat on the menu?
Exactly. And that goes back to a treaty that was originally signed in 1933 with the Orion Greys fronting for the Draco reptilians by Franklin Delano Roosevelt aboard a battleship in Balboa, Panama. And then another treaty signed in 1948 by Harry S. Truman. And then the 1954 Greada Treaty. And then the Tau 9 Treaty signed by George H.W. Bush. Now, what happened is that once Donald J. Trump, the current president, started saying, "Oh, I'm going to walk away from these treaties. I'm going to walk away from the global warming treaty." We said, "Okay." We drafted a proposal completely with all of the policy things, and we said, abrogate this. We called it abrogate this. Okay, you really want to get to the bottom of the problems? Abrogate the Greada Treaty, because if you abrogate the Greada Treaty, you're going to pull away from the power of the Draco reptilians, because they're the core problem.
And what will they do?
Nothing, because you're pulling out, you're pulling the U.S. out from the legal obligation that you have to the Dracos. But
So they will do nothing about that? Like threaten to come squish us or blow us apart?
no, because you can make deals with much better ETs like the Russians have done. That's the whole deal. So what we did, in fact, I've got a radio program, a TV program, where I went to Laura Eisenhower, who's the great granddaughter of Dwight Eisenhower, who signed the Greada Treaty. I said, Laura, will you go in to the Oval Office with this paper and say, and put it on in the Oval Office and say, will you sign this, abrogate the Greada Treaty? And she said, yep, I'll do it. So we have all that is necessary to pull away from this death grip that the Draco reptilians have on the United States of America.
Right. Then who did the Russians get? If it ain't the Dracos, who did you mention? The Russians got somebody else. Maybe we should be talking to them guys.
Yeah. And actually, what happened was this. Eisenhower met with both parties. Eisenhower met with, first of all, with a group of them, and they are the Nordics, and they said this was right before they were going to have the Bravo test of hydrogen bombs in the South Pacific. And they said to Eisenhower, look, we can provide to you all of these positive, a lot of technology that's positive. We're just asking you, don't go forward with nuclear weapons, okay? And Eisenhower said, okay. And he wasn't strong enough. And they went forward and had the Bravo test and went forward with their hydrogen weapons. And then they went forward and signed the Greada Treaty with the Draco. So the United States
Why would they do that? Why would they do that if there was better benevolent races out there, I guess is what you're saying?
Yeah, that's a question that we've put to Laura Eisenhower. That's a question that many exopoliticians have asked. And that is that the military-industrial complex was too powerful, and they overwhelmed everybody. And they were in league with the Fourth Reich, the Nazi secret government in Antarctica, which had taken over the U.S.
Boy, look at this all, how much meat is on the bone. There might be some listeners out there, whoop-de-dude. But no, this is, look at how much information Mr. Weber's given us. And he's just jumping around trying to put pieces together. But I think this is a good start for an opening show with us, sir. For future shows, hopefully, you'll feel the same way, where all this will get let out. Because it's very important, especially where it will lead up to, obviously, what we're now faced with, the space race even becoming public, and the Space Force.
Yeah, you see, I think
public.
it's yeah, exactly. So I think that we have had a space force, and there is the secret space program has been there since the 1960s.
Oh, like Trump said, we may have a space force. We'll develop another one. It's like, and no one got it. He just said we may have one, meaning, we may already have one, that we have one, sought disclosure. We'll develop another one. Those are very
Yeah,
talented.
yeah, but we can't go down the road that we've been before, which
Right.
is the road of the Dracos. That's like that's like saying, "Oh, Darth Vader's been out there and all we have to do is just follow Darth Vader again." No. We are Luke Skywalker, and that's who we are. And that's what we have to do. We have to go with and make alliances with the Regional Galactic Governance Council. They are the local governance that's in charge of oversees our planet. They're the Pleiadians, the Alpha Centaurians, the
So that's why
Sirians.
that's why the Dracos are saying coming to eat us all, is because of the other forces that may be keeping them in check. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's the Draco reptilians do not respect the law of non-interference. The way that exopolitically our universe operates, our galaxies operate, is through the law of non-interference, and that is that it's like
Like Star Trek.
yeah, it's like in anthropology. If you're in the South Pacific and you come across an island with a pristine culture that has never been hit with Doritos, modern culture, you don't want to touch it, right? You want to just non-interfere. It's the same thing in the universe. There's the law of non-interference. The Dracos don't respect that, okay?
They see stuff they want.
Yeah,
Is it
exactly.
just baby meat?
This is basically the reason why the United States has become the most powerful military nation on the planet is because we've served as shills and a front for the Draco reptilians ever since World War II. Big effing deal, right? It's because they signed secret treaties with them, starting with FDR, Harry Truman, uh, Dwight Eisenhower, and then George H.W. Bush. Big deal. And what it does is it does. Do you know why there are between 300,000 and 800,000 missing children every year in America? Why
Right.
there is? Because the FBI and all police forces on down are on stand down orders. Those are quotas. Those missing children are quotas. They have to deliver quotas, and those quotas go into the child trafficking quotas for the solar system, for children parts, the child trafficking quotas for the Middle East, for the rest of the planet. All of that comes out of the treaty. Out of the Greada Treaty, it means that the FBI and all the police forces can't go after missing children. That's why we have so many missing children, because there are quotas for the Dracos. That's why we have testimony from military personnel on Air Force bases that they have every month they have trucks that come in with cans of baby meat that are put on vehicles that's handed over for the Dracos. Okay?
abortion, adrenochrome. And now we know who Hillary and all them are bowing down to and what's going on in this nation.
Yeah.
Mr. Weber, it's okay with you. I think that's a great segue to go to a break.
Okay.
All right, now think about please mute your mic until we come back. And I think that's a great place, people. Again, pack them and smoke them. You definitely need them this night, as well as what the Martian revelation is going to entail. Things are just getting heated up in the public Space Force, public space race. Well, it sounds, if according to Mr. Weber, you hear what, and Mr. Bishago and others, we already have. We may already have a space program. We'll develop another one. A Space Force. We'll develop another one. I mean, right there's no telling. Vice President Mike Pence, we're going to put American boots on the face of Mars. Again, people ponder all that as we come back with our guest, Mr. Alfred Lamont Weber, on the Martian Revelation.
I'll be back.
Don't run. We are your friends.
Imagine.
Let's hear your host, the Mars Revealer, known also as the Mad Martian. And you're listening to the Martian Revelation, which is still upon you all now. And we're with our guest, Mr. Alfred Lamont Weber. And I got to say, very interesting. And kind of reminds you of the scenario from that show, V. Remember that show, V, everybody out there? And is that a correct assessment there, Mr. Weber?
Yes. And that's exactly it. Because we humans are kind of a captive population, and so we really have to come into our own.
I want to talk to that committee.
Which committee is that?
Which committee? The one you told me about that oversees and looks and dictates how things get going. That committee of, I don't know, solar system watchers or defenders, whatever they're.
Oh yeah. Well, look, basically affairs on our planet are overseen by the Regional Galactic Governance Council. And that's the Pleiadians, the Alpha Centaurians, the Sirians, and others. And if you go to the website positivefuture.info, you will see there that what I'm aspiring to is to be Earth's representative to the Regional Galactic Governance Council, and I have a whole platform there. Because I believe that our situation on Earth here is so complex and so intermingled, with the possibility of a nuclear trifecta and the possibility that, as you said, 50% of our population is really reptilian.